Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to look at the different versions or the different variations of the Stanley Bench Plane that was made throughout the years. Now, I'm not talking about the different types. When you look at their standard bench plane, there's types 1 through 20 with subtle changes throughout the types. I'm not covering that because there's enough videos out there that do. But what I want to talk about is the different versions of that plane that were made. So I'm sure a lot of people know about the Bedrock. There's Handyman, Defiance, whatever this one is, but then they also have a G4, an A4, and an S4, and those are the ones that we're going to check out today, so stick with me. To start, I want to get a couple different variations out of the way. So going from cheapest to most expensive, Stanley made a couple. I guess I would say that these are the more common ones. These are the more standard ones that you're going to see when you're out in the wild or searching eBay. So this version is actually still available. This is the cheapest one that you can buy. I'm not going to take it apart, but you can see that it is just the cheapest one. Plastic tote, plastic knob. Maybe this one was for the guy that needed it like once or twice a year. Then Stanley made a line that was called the Handyman. Now, back in the day, it was common for every toolbox to have a hand plane in it. For the guy that needed it maybe 5 times a year, trim a door, fix a shelf, fix a drawer, you know, that kind of stuff. That's what these planes were made for. They were made for those people. Now, when you look at these planes, this is a Defiance. The frog on the Handyman is the same. They cheaped out a lot. So a frog is a pivotal point in a plane because it needs a lot of support. It needs to be very sturdy because there's a lot of pressure going against it. Now with this one, as you can see, there's a big gap here. It's pretty thin and it's not made out of the best material. The frog bed is also not super supportive of the frog. So these were just the cheaper line of planes. Now I do know of people that use them, but just know that you're gonna have to put a lot of work into them to get them up to where these ones would perform. Then we get into the professional line of hand planes that Stanley made. These are the standard ones that I see most commonly people still have as users because they were machined better. This is the one that Stanley took and did all of those different types. So they did 20 types of this version. Now, when we look at the bed on these, throughout the types, there are different variations, but this is just an example of one of the ones that I have. So there's more support for the bed here versus what you saw with the Defiance and the Handyman. The frog is also closer in here, so it has more support. It's thicker. It's made of better material. It's just for the guy that could be using it every single day. Or maybe the serious DIY guy that wanted like a nice plane for fine woodworking. I would consider the Handymans and then whatever this one is to be more for like rough work. Then we get into the Cadillac of the Cadillac of Stanley planes. At least that's what I consider it. I consider this one to be the superior design. Some people may argue me when we get into the G4s, but this one was made for the like rich professional in mind, the guy that was going to use it every single day, and that could afford it because these were pretty pricey at the time. Now, I say that they are superior because of how the frog and the bed was designed. So, as we talked about, the frog is a very important part of the plane, and so is the frog bed. So what they did is they machined them both flat so that they perfectly align and they perfectly meet in there. That's why I consider this one to be the superior design. It is so superior that Lee Nielsen actually copied this. So I do have a video coming up that's going to show the Bedrock 604 versus the Lee Nielsen number 4. So I wanted to get those ones out of the way so that we could then talk about the G4, the S4, and the A4, which are the other versions that were made. So let's bring those ones over. Now we get into what I consider the specialty planes that Stanley made. Now, I'm not sure if they were just experimenting or if this was just more of a marketing thing, but they made different versions, and those are the ones that I want to show you guys because some people don't know that they exist. So the first one I want to look at is the A4. Now, it's called the A4 because it's made out of aluminum, so the body and the frog are both aluminum. The style and the design is the same as the standard plane that I showed you earlier. They just changed the material, so it's not cast. So the frog is not cast and the body is not cast, but the style is the same. So I just think that that one's kind of neat. And it's also very light. It almost feels like you don't have anything in your hand when you're holding this. Now, some people would argue that that's not good, Because when you're planing, if you have the weight of that plane, that helps you. If you don't have the weight of the plane, you've got to put a lot of pressure into that plane to keep the cut going, or else it'll lift out. So there is the A4. The cap, they did not change. The cap is still the same as the standard. I wanted to mention that too. They didn't change this to aluminum, which I think was smart. Then we get into the S4, and they call it the S4 because it was made out of steel. So the body is steel. That's pretty much the only change other than the shape of the frog, which I'll show you. But here's what the body looks like. They added a really cool design here that I kind of like. I kind of think that it's cool. They also added some designs in the body here. As you can see, those, I don't know if they're rivets or pins or whatever they are, but I just think that they're neat. And then there's a subtle, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it, a subtle S4 up here. They also added a rib down here too, just to give it, I think, a little bit more strength.
Just a really cool looking plane. I want to show you the frog.
So there is the frog. They made it in a different style than the standard one. So this is the standard frog. They basically just slimmed it on the top. Now, I'm okay with that. I know I say that the frog needs a lot of support, but this is just the shoulders of the iron, so I'm not sure that that's going to hurt it in use. But I just like that they added these details and just made it look cool. So that is the S4. The cap for this one remained the same also. The last plane we're going to talk about here is the G4, or the Gage 4. Now, the idea behind this plane is that it is self-setting, that you should be able to take this iron out, sharpen it, put it back in, and have everything where you left it. So, let me go through this and show you the differences. The first thing is this sweep right here. They still made the body out of cast, but they added this sweep that I just think is really neat. If you guys know Veritas, it's pretty similar to Veritas with that baby shark design. But here is the cap, which to me looks like an ogre. You have the eyes, you have the nose, you have the mouth with the teeth. But I think it's neat looking. So the cap and the chip breaker are connected. So there's the chip breaker on the back. Now with this too, if you can see, there's gaps in there, so you can adjust the chip breaker. Okay, so you can move it closer or farther away from the iron if you want to. But the idea behind this is that when you take this out of the plane, you don't have to reset the chip breaker. When you get to a standard one, the chip breaker is connected to the iron. So when you take the iron out to sharpen it, you have to remove the chip breaker and then set it back where you had it, hopefully. So with this one, you don't have to do that. What that helps is, because the chip breaker hooks to the yoke, this yoke is controlled by this depth adjuster. So it raises and lowers depending on if you want to advance or retract the blade. That hooks right into here. So when you take this chip breaker off, if you don't put it exactly where it was before, your depth is off. The other thing with that is there's play here. Let me show you this way. So there's play in that too, which is also going to affect the depth. You're going to have to readjust it no matter what on the standard planes. Now with this one, they put this extra piece on the iron. Now this extra piece has this little mouth right here that hooks onto the depth adjuster. Now there is still some play in this. So there is still play there, but I'm believing it's going to rest and you're just going to tighten it down. But you don't have to remove this when you sharpen. So you can flatten your back right here, and then to sharpen the bevel, you can sharpen the bevel right there, and this doesn't have to be removed. So you don't have to worry about this and where this is set on the iron, because this was controlling the depth. Now this is controlling the depth. Okay. Now, again, some people are going to argue me and say that this one is better than the Bedrock. When it comes to the self-setting capabilities, absolutely, I agree. When it comes to the Frog, I'm not sure. I'm excited to try them side by side, but the Bedrock Frog design is the superior. I'm curious to see where this one rates, because it does look like it has a lot of support in here. The top of the Frog is connected by these pins on the side, but it's completely hollow underneath there. So, I'm not sure. I really wish they could have taken the Bedrock Frog and this self-setting idea and combined the two, I think that would have been like the end all be all best plane ever. But that would be difficult. So let me put this back together and show you why. So that loops through there, connects. The cap, as you can see, it's going to rest on this bar. When you get to a standard one, it's this screw. Same with the Bedrock, it's this screw. So you have the iron and the chip breaker connect there, and then the cap is what holds all that together. With this one, it's pretty much this bar that's holding everything together. Because you put this in there, and you tighten this down, and then it locks in place. So that's a major difference there too. The other thing you'll notice is when I tighten and loosen this, see how this lowers? And then I tighten it and it raises it up. That pinches the chip breaker against the iron, which in my mind is superior to this style because it's way up here and you've got to have the bend. And I know they make other ones now where the chip breaker is flat. I don't know why it won't focus, but yeah, so that's another difference there. So all in all, I think the Gage is really cool. Really superior design when it comes to setting this up and having it be able to take this out, sharpen it, and put it back where you left it and go back to town. But again, I'm curious to see if the frog design is better than the Bedrock. So as you saw, Stanley made a couple different variations of their bench planes throughout the years. They had the cheaper ones that were made for the Handyman, just to kind of have in a toolbox, which was normal at the time, to pull it out, maybe 1 to 5 times a year to trim something up or fix a shelf. Then they made the professional lines of planes, which are the most common, I think the most common planes that are as users nowadays for people. Then they had the Cadillac of the professional planes, which was the Bedrock. If you had the money at that time, you were buying the Bedrock because it was the best design. Then, of course, the specialty ones that I just think are really cool. You have the S4 with the steel body and then the really cool shape on the frog. You have the A4, which is an aluminum body and an aluminum frog. And then my favorite is the G4. So this one is the Gage self-setting one. It's just a really cool design that you can take this iron out, sharpen it, put it back, and have it where it needs to be. Now, of course, a future video is going to be me comparing this to the Bedrock because that's an argument that I hear quite a bit, that these ones are better than the Bedrock. I think the self-setting feature is going to be better than the Bedrock, but I don't know that it's going to beat that frog design. Again, I really wish they could have combined those two into the same plane, and that would have been, in my opinion, the end-all be-all best plane that existed. But that's for a future video. I do know that Stanley made other specialty planes as well, but these are the ones I have on hand. If I end up grabbing any more, of course, that's going to be a future video. So check out that Buy Me a Coffee thing if you enjoy this content and you want to see more of it. And then, of course, like and subscribe. Have a good one, guys.